Padre Pio sat across from Lorenzo in the confessional at San Giovanni Rotondo and held his hands in silence for what felt like a very long time. Then he looked up, and his eyes held something Lorenzo had never seen before in another person's face. Not accusation, not pity, but a kind of sorrowful knowledge, as if he were looking at something lodged deep inside the man before him that Lorenzo himself had long since stopped looking at. And then Padre Pio said, "You said 3 words to your mother, once 22 years ago." Lorenzo felt the blood leave his face. "Those 3 words," Padre Pio continued quietly, "are still alive inside your soul. Right now, I can see them." Lorenzo was 38 years old, a carpenter from Lecce, a decent man. He went to Mass every Sunday, prayed the rosary, worked hard to provide for his wife and children. He was not a man who considered himself to carry great sins. And yet, kneeling in that confessional, the full weight of something he had spent 22 years not thinking about settled over him like a stone. What Padre Pio saw inside Lorenzo's soul that day in 1957 will stay with you long after this video ends. Because most of us have said something, once, in anger to someone we love, and then moved on. Moved on and told ourselves that time had dissolved it, that the person had forgiven us, that the moment had passed. But Padre Pio had a gift that most of us lack. He could see the spiritual reality of a human soul the way a skilled physician can read an X-ray and find the fracture line that the untrained eye cannot locate. And what he saw inside Lorenzo that day was not a fracture. It was something older, something that had calcified. Hold on, because in a few moments I am going to tell you exactly what Padre Pio saw. What words like "I hate you" look like in the spiritual world. And what happens when the same mouth that cursed learns to bless. I promise you this, what I am about to share changes the way you understand every word you have spoken in anger and every word you might still speak. We live in a world that tells us words are temporary. You say something in anger, the moment passes, life goes on. Even in the confessional, we name our sins and they are absolved, and we walk out into the sunlight feeling lighter. And that is true. Absolution is real and beautiful and necessary. But Padre Pio knew something that took me years to fully understand. There is a difference between a sin being forgiven before God and the spiritual residue of that sin being fully healed in our relationships and in our souls. Think about the last time you said something sharp to someone you love. Maybe it was your spouse. Maybe it was your child. Maybe it was, and this is what this story is about, maybe it was your mother or your father. A moment of exhaustion, of frustration, when something came out that you immediately wished you could take back, and maybe you apologized, or maybe you didn't, and life went on. The person seemed fine. You seemed fine. And yet, there is something that happens in those moments that we cannot see, and it is not metaphorical. Padre Pio, whose mystical gifts were documented by physicians, theologians, and Vatican investigators who did not always believe in such things, could see it. He could see it the way you can see a bruise on the skin that tells you something deeper is injured beneath. And what he saw in Lorenzo Benedetti's soul that day in 1957 is a story I want to share with you today. Because I believe many of you will recognize something in it. Not because you are bad people, but because you are human. And because, like Lorenzo, you have probably said something that you thought was forgotten. It is not forgotten, and here is what gives me hope about this story. It can be healed, not by time, not by general remorse, but by something specific. Something that Padre Pio taught Lorenzo to do. And when Lorenzo did it, what happened in his family is one of the most quietly moving accounts I have ever encountered in all my years of studying Padre Pio's life. You know, before I go further, I need to say something personal, because this story hit me in a way I did not expect when I first encountered it. I was 13 years old when my mother first became seriously ill. Leukemia. And in the months before she died, I was 14 when she passed. I said things to her that no daughter should say to a dying mother. I said them out of terror and helplessness and a kind of fury that had nowhere else to go. And she died a year later. And I never got to take those words back the way Lorenzo did. So when I tell you today that what Padre Pio taught Lorenzo matters deeply, I am not speaking from a comfortable distance. I am speaking as someone who knows what it is to carry words inside you that were never properly named and released. This story matters to me, and I believe it will matter to you. Lorenzo Benedetti was born in 1919 in Lecce, in the heel of Italy's boot, the southernmost city of Puglia, known for its Baroque churches and the particular quality of its afternoon light, a warm gold that turns the stone buildings the color of honey. His father, Alberto, was a woodworker, and Lorenzo had inherited both his trade and his hands. Alberto died of tuberculosis in 1931 when Lorenzo was 12 years old. From that point forward, the household was held together by one woman, Donna Elvira Benedetti. Donna Elvira was not a sentimental woman. She did not have the luxury of sentimentality. She worked as a seamstress during the day and took in laundry in the evenings. She kept the house clean, fed Lorenzo and his younger sister Maria, made sure they went to Mass, did their schoolwork, and stayed out of the worst company. She was not cold. Those who knew her would tell you she was warm in the way that only people who have been genuinely tested can be warm. A warmth that does not perform itself because it does not need to. But she was strict, and she was tired. And in 1935, when Lorenzo was 16, and the streets buzzed with the particular electricity of young men who wanted to be somewhere other than home, on one particular Saturday in June, Donna Elvira said no. No, Lorenzo could not go to the dance in Gallipoli with Tonino Esposito and his friends. She did not like the company he was keeping. She had seen Tonino twice, and both times she had noticed something in his eyes that she did not trust. She told Lorenzo this, simply, without drama. And Lorenzo, who had been 16 for 6 months, and who understood nothing yet about what a woman with 2 jobs and a dead husband and a 12-year-old daughter, and nothing to protect her family with, except her own instincts, looks like from the inside. Lorenzo exploded. He said the things that young men say when they have not yet understood the weight of words. He said she was ruining his life. He said she did not understand anything. And then, and this is the moment that Padre Pio would find 22 years later, crystallized in his soul like a stone, he said 3 words. I hate you. Donna Elvira went very still. She was standing at the kitchen counter, and she did not turn around. Lorenzo watched her back for a moment and saw her shoulders rise slightly, then settle. And then she said quietly, "Go to bed, Lorenzo." She did not cry, not in front of him. Whether she cried later, in the privacy of her room with the door closed, he never knew. He went to bed furious. He fell asleep furious. And in the morning he woke up, and the sun was shining through the window, and his sister was in the kitchen, and his mother put a cup of coffee in front of him without saying anything about the night before. And life went on. He never apologized. Not that week, not that month, not that year, not in the 22 years that followed. It was not a deliberate cruelty. He simply did not have the vocabulary for it. The words had been said. Time had passed. His mother was alive and apparently fine. He got married to Carmela Vacca in 1945, a woman from Brindisi whose family had moved to Lecce after the war. They had 2 children, Enzo, born in 1946, and little Elvira, born in 1950, named after his mother at Carmela's insistence, which had touched Donna Elvira very much, though Lorenzo had agreed to the name almost reflexively, without fully understanding why. His life was not unhappy. He was good at his trade, respected in the neighborhood, genuinely loved his wife and children. He went to Mass on Sundays and prayed the rosary sometimes in the evenings. He was, by any reasonable external measure, a decent Catholic man of his time and place. And yet there was something he had never quite been able to name, between himself and his mother, a distance that had never fully closed, even though they saw each other every Sunday for lunch and spoke with warmth, and his mother adored his children, and by all outward appearances their relationship was fine. But when he tried in his prayer to feel the closeness to God that the priests described, that sense of an open channel, of light moving freely, he often encountered something that felt like a ceiling. Prayers would rise and then stop. He would complete his rosary and feel not much. It had always been this way. He had assumed it was his nature. Some people, he thought, simply do not feel these things as deeply. 3 months before his pilgrimage to San Giovanni Rotondo, something happened that changed his understanding of his own numbness. His son, Enzo, who was 11 years old, spoke to Carmela in a tone that froze Lorenzo in the doorway. Not the specific words, something about not wanting to do his schoolwork, but the tone underneath the words. A dismissive contempt that had no business in an 11-year-old boy's voice when he spoke to his mother. Lorenzo stood in the doorway and felt something he could not name, a recognition that was also a dread. Carmela's sister Rosa came to visit the following week. Rosa was a woman who said what she thought, which was sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes exactly what was needed. She watched Enzo speak to Carmela during dinner, and afterward, when the children were in bed, she said to Lorenzo, "That boy is learning something from somewhere, and it is not from Carmela." She paused. "Have you thought about making a pilgrimage? About going to see Padre Pio?" Lorenzo almost said no. He was busy. The workshop had a backlog of orders. The drive to Foggia was long, and he was not the kind of man who made pilgrimages. That was more his mother's sort of thing. But something about Rosa's question settled in him in the days that followed and refused to leave. And 3 weeks later, he made the journey to San Giovanni Rotondo. He waited 9 hours to go to confession. 9 hours in the courtyard, in the sun and then the shade, watching dozens of people file in and out of the small church, some emerging with tears on their faces, some with an expression he could not quite define. Not happiness exactly, but something like relief, stripped of all its usual noise. When it was finally his turn, he knelt inside the confessional and began with his ordinary sins, the ones he always confessed. And Padre Pio listened. And then, before Lorenzo had finished, he stopped him and said those words. "You said 3 words to your mother, once, 22 years ago. Those 3 words are still alive inside your soul, right now. I can see them. Hold on, because what Padre Pio said next is the most important part of this story. And most people, when they hear about mystical gifts like Padre Pio's, imagine they must be frightening or abstract. But what Padre Pio described to Lorenzo was not frightening at all. It was specific, it was clear, and it explained something that Lorenzo had wondered about his entire adult life. Padre Pio told Lorenzo what he saw when he looked at his soul, and he used an image that Lorenzo, as a carpenter, would understand immediately. "Think of a piece of wood," Padre Pio said. "A good piece of wood from a strong tree, well-dried, well-chosen. When you build something from good wood, the structure holds, the joints fit, the grain runs where it should run, and the weight is distributed as it should be distributed. Now imagine," he continued, "that when the wood was still young, when the tree was still forming its rings, something happened to the grain, a wound to the tree, a deep cut, badly healed. It does not kill the tree. The tree keeps growing. The wood that forms around the wound is solid wood, but the grain is disrupted at that point, and if you cut a board from that tree and look carefully, you can see where the wound was. And a skilled carpenter," Padre Pio said, "builds differently around that point. He knows the strength is not the same there." Lorenzo was silent. "Your soul," Padre Pio said, "is good wood, but there is a point in the grain that was disrupted when you were 16 years old, and I can see it." Then Padre Pio described what he saw in more specific terms, not as a metaphor any longer, but as a spiritual reality. In the mystical theology of the Church, and Padre Pio was deeply trained in that theology as well as graced with direct vision, words spoken with genuine hatred toward one's parents carry a particular spiritual gravity. This is why the fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother, is not simply a social courtesy. It describes a spiritual architecture. God designed the relationship between parent and child to be a primary channel of grace. The blessing that flows from parent to child and the honor that flows from child to parent are not merely beautiful family values. They are the structure through which divine grace was designed to move in a family in both directions, like current through a circuit. When that circuit is broken, not by ordinary conflict, not by disagreement, but by genuine contempt, by words of hatred, what happens is not just a relational wound. What happens in the spiritual world that Padre Pio could see is that a portion of that channel calcifies. It does not close entirely, but it becomes narrow, and what should flow freely through it begins to move with difficulty, like a pipe that has scaled over on the inside. The water still passes, but not as it should. What I see in your soul, Padre Pio said to Lorenzo, is a narrowing at that point. 22 years of prayers and masses and rosaries have kept the channel open. You are not a man without grace. But there is a point where the current slows, where what should be full is partial, where what should be light is shadow, and from that point the narrowing extends outward in 3 directions. Lorenzo listened. One direction toward your mother, Padre Pio said, which is why there is still, after 22 years, a distance between you that you cannot name, but that you feel every Sunday when you sit down to lunch together, and something remains unsaid. Lorenzo said nothing, but Padre Pio was right, and he knew it. One direction toward your wife, not because of anything she has done or anything you have done to her specifically, but because when a channel in the soul is narrowed, the things that should flow through it, warmth, openness, the ability to receive love as well as give it, all of these become slightly reduced. You love Carmela, I can see that, but can you receive her love fully? Or is there always a slight resistance somewhere inside you, a sense of keeping something back? Lorenzo felt the accuracy of this like a pressure on his chest, and one direction toward your son. This was the one that stopped him completely, toward his son Enzo, who had spoken to Carmela in that tone 3 months ago, who had looked at his mother with that dismissive contempt. Lorenzo had never spoken that way to Carmela, and yet somehow the pattern had entered the boy. Padre Pio was quiet for a moment. Then he said, children do not learn contempt by being taught it in words. They absorb it from the atmosphere of the home, from what is unspoken but present. Your son did not learn that tone from you directly. He absorbed something from the narrowing in you that he cannot see, but that he lives with every day. The same way a plant in a room with insufficient light does not know the light is insufficient. It simply grows in the direction it finds. Your son is growing toward a pattern that you established when you were 16, and if nothing changes, he will establish it more firmly in himself before long. I need to stop here for a moment because I want to say something from my years working alongside families, first as a nurse, then as a parish volunteer in Coventry. What Padre Pio describes here is not mystical abstraction. I have seen it in real life, in ordinary families, in the most concrete possible terms. I have sat at the bedsides of elderly parents whose children were distant in ways that no one could fully explain, and you could genuinely feel that something between them had never been said. A particular quality of silence that was not peaceful. And I have watched in other families what happens when an adult child says the specific thing that needed to be said. And I mean specific. Not a general, I'm sorry for everything, but the naming of an actual moment. And the air in the room changes. I have seen this with my own eyes. Padre Pio saw it with mystical sight, but it is real on any level you choose to examine it. Padre Pio told Lorenzo about another man, a man from Bari named Giacomo, who had come to San Giovanni Rotondo some years before. Giacomo had done something worse than what Lorenzo had done. In a moment of rage, he was 20, his father had just died, and his mother had said something that landed wrong. Giacomo had struck his mother, open-handed, across the face. The sound of it had stopped everything in the house. He had walked out and not come back for 3 months. When he returned, his mother had opened the door and said nothing about it. Life had resumed. But what Padre Pio saw in Giacomo's soul when Giacomo eventually came to confession was something that haunted Padre Pio himself. Because in the spiritual world, the blow that Giacomo had struck was not in the past. It was an ongoing event. The moment was sealed in Giacomo's soul, like an insect preserved in amber, not as a memory, but as a living spiritual object, still generating its effect outward. The cold chamber that had formed around it was larger than anything Padre Pio had seen from words alone. But here is what is important, and here is what Padre Pio told Lorenzo about Giacomo, because Giacomo's story did not end there. Giacomo had come to San Giovanni Rotondo not to confess the blow to his mother. He had come for something else entirely, a concern about his business, which was failing. And when Padre Pio refused to discuss the business and went directly to the blow, Giacomo had been astonished and then horrified. He had wept in the confessional for a long time. And then Padre Pio had given him his penance. And the penance was not prayers or fasts or novenas. The penance was this: go home to your mother, sit at the kitchen table with her, and with your own hand, the hand that struck her, take her hand in yours and name what you did. Not in general. The specific action, the specific moment. Say it out loud, in her presence, using the exact words. Giacomo had done it. He had driven home to Bari that same afternoon, and what had happened in that kitchen, the specific words, the specific moment of contact between that hand and the old woman's hand, had produced something that Padre Pio later described to a fellow priest in terms that still astonish me whenever I read them. He said that when Giacomo did what he had been told to do, he witnessed in the spiritual world something he had seen very rarely: a sealed chamber, in a soul being unlocked from the inside. The crystallized object inside, the preserved moment of the blow, did not disappear instantly, but it began to dissolve, and in its place, over the weeks and months that followed, what grew was not merely the ordinary grace that flows through an intact Fifth Commandment channel. What grew was something richer. A particular quality of grace, that Padre Pio said, can only be generated by the specific act of choosing to honor someone you have previously dishonored. It is like wood that has been cut and repaired and cured, Padre Pio told Lorenzo, returning to his image. The repair, if done properly, creates a joint that is sometimes stronger than the original wood around it. Not always, but sometimes. The choice to honor after choosing to dishonor carries a weight that ordinary honor does not carry, because it costs more. Lorenzo sat in that confessional understanding something he had not understood before. The words, "I hate you," said once, 22 years ago, to a woman who had done nothing but work herself to exhaustion for his sake, those words had not disappeared with time. They had been waiting, not as punishment, not as judgment, but as an unfinished thing, a door left open in a storm, and the storm had been moving through that door quietly for 2 decades. And now Padre Pio said something that made Lorenzo's hands go cold. "Your son Enzo," Padre Pio said. "How old is he?" 11, Lorenzo said. Padre Pio was quiet for a moment. Then, "He is 5 years from 16. 5 years from his own version of that June night in your kitchen. Not the same night, not the same words, but the same pattern, because it is inside him the way it was inside you when you were his age. He did not inherit the sin, but he absorbed the pattern. The way a child learns to walk by watching the adults around him walk, including their limp. Lorenzo said nothing. If nothing changes between now and then, Padre Pio continued, he will have his own 3 words, or his own 3 actions, toward his mother, or toward his wife, or toward his own children later, and the chain continues. Do you understand what I'm saying? Lorenzo understood. He understood it in the specific physical way that a carpenter understands when a beam is load-bearing. Not abstractly, but with his hands and his body. The chain is not broken by confession alone, Padre Pio said. Confession restores your relationship with God, but the channel in your soul and the pattern in your son, those require something else, something active, something done in the physical world, with your physical voice to the specific person. Padre Pio gave Lorenzo 3 specific instructions. He said them simply and clearly, with the directness that those who knew Padre Pio always described as his most consistent characteristic. Not harsh, but without unnecessary softening. The first, go to your mother's house, not on Sunday at lunch with the children around and the noise of the family. Go on a weekday in the morning when she is alone, sit at her kitchen table and say these specific words. Mama, in June of 1935, when I was 16 years old, I said to you, I hate you. It was a lie and it was wrong and I am asking your forgiveness. Do not add explanations. Do not add context. Do not say you were young, or you were angry, or you did not mean it. Those may all be true, but they are not what she needs to hear. What she needs to hear is the specific words, acknowledged directly, without softening. Lorenzo asked, what if she says it was nothing? What if she says she has already forgiven him? She may say many things, Padre Pio said. Let her say them. Listen to all of them. And when she has finished, say the second thing, the second instruction. Say these words to her. You have been a good mother. I am honored to be your son. Not simply I love you, though that too if it comes naturally, but specifically honored. Because honor is the currency of the 5th commandment, not just affection, not just gratitude, honor. The specific thing that was withheld in that moment of hatred must be the specific thing that is given back. And the 3rd instruction surprised Lorenzo most. Within 1 week of this conversation with your mother, bring your son Enzo to her house, not for Sunday lunch with everyone. Bring him alone. Let him spend 1 hour with his grandmother. Give them a task if you like. Let him help her in the garden or sit with her while she sews. But make it quiet and make it without screens or tasks that keep them from being present with each other. And let that hour happen without your involvement. Wait outside if you need to. But let grace move through the channel you are reopening, and let it move not just back to you, but forward to him. Lorenzo asked why the 3rd thing mattered. Why not simply fix it between himself and his mother? Because, Padre Pio said, the chain does not end with you. It never ends with the person who breaks it. Grace, when it is released, moves forward as well as backward. Your act of honoring your mother will open something in you. But what moves through that open place will not stop at you. It will reach your son, not because you explain it to him, not because you give him a lesson about the 5th commandment, but because grace moves through open channels the way water moves through a cleared pipe. You do not have to teach the water which way to go. Before I tell you what happened when Lorenzo walked into his mother's kitchen, and what happened to his son Enzo 5 years later, I want to pause for just a moment, because if you are watching this video, you are one of those rare people who still believe that what we carry inside us matters, that the spiritual dimension of our lives is real. That one moment, one word, one choice can leave something that time alone cannot erase, but that the right act can heal. These are not popular beliefs in our world today, and reaching the people who hold them requires resources and effort, and something I cannot do alone. If this channel has given you something of value, if this story has touched something real in you, please consider using the Super Thanks button below. It is not just financial support for what we do here. It is your way of saying that these stories deserve to be heard, that the people carrying what Lorenzo carried deserve to know there is a path forward. Every contribution, however small, keeps this work going. You are not just a viewer here. You are part of something. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Lorenzo drove to Lecce 3 days later. He did not tell his mother he was coming. He arrived at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. When he knew she would be alone, Maria had moved to Naples the previous year with her husband. He knocked on the door of the small house in the Piazzetta Santa Chiara that he had grown up in, where the walls still had the same cream paint he remembered from childhood, where the kitchen smelled of coffee and the particular soap his mother had always used. Donna Elvira opened the door and looked at him with the mild surprise of a woman who has learned not to expect much, but is always quietly glad when something comes. She said, "Lorenzo, come in." She put the coffee on without being asked, as she always had. They sat at the kitchen table, the same chairs, the same window looking out onto the small courtyard where a lemon tree had been growing since before Lorenzo was born. And for a moment, he thought he could not do it. He was 38 years old, and he was a grown man, and he had said harder things to people in his life, professionally and personally, and yet, sitting across from his mother's small, lined face and her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, he thought, for a moment, that he had made a mistake coming here. And then he thought of Padre Pio's words, "The same mouth that cursed can bless." And he said it. "Mama, in June of 1935, when I was 16 years old, I said to you, I hate you. It was a lie. It was wrong. And I am asking your forgiveness." Donna Elvira was still. She set down her coffee cup very slowly. And then she looked at her son, really looked at him, in the way that she had not quite done since he could not remember when, and her eyes filled with tears. Not the tears of a woman who has been hurt and is now being asked to release that hurt. The tears of a woman who has been waiting, who has been, as she now told him, praying. "Lorenzo," she said. Her voice was steady, but the tears ran freely. "I forgave you that night. Before I went to sleep, I went to my room and I knelt at the little statue of Our Lady of Grace on my dresser. You know the one, the blue one. And I said a prayer for you, and I forgave you. I was never angry at you. I was only sad, because I knew that those words were going to stay inside you, and I could not take them out." Lorenzo found that his own eyes were wet, which surprised him. "I have prayed every single day since that June night," Donna Elvira said, "for the moment when those words would come back out of you and into the air between us, where they could finally dissolve. And you have come today, and you have said what needed to be said." Lorenzo remembered the second thing. "You have been a good mother," he said. His voice was not steady, but he said it. "I am honored to be your son." Donna Elvira reached across the table and put her hand over his, the hand of a woman who had sewn and laundered and cleaned and cooked and kept a family alive by herself for more than 2 decades. A hand that showed every year of all of that. And she held it for a long moment without speaking. And in that silence, Lorenzo experienced something he had not experienced in prayer for as long as he could remember. The sensation of a door opening, quietly, without drama, like a window that had been painted shut for years, and then someone found the right grip and it opened, and outside air came in, and you realized only then how stale the air inside had been. He stayed for 3 hours. They drank 2 more cups of coffee. His mother told him things about his father that she had never told him before, small stories, quiet details of a man who had died when Lorenzo was 12, a man he had been trying to reconstruct from memory ever since. And she listened to him talk about his children, about Enzo, about the workshop, about the small worries and ordinary joys of his life, with an attention he had not felt her give him since he was a boy. When he left, she stood at the door and watched him walk away, and at the corner he turned back. He did not plan to. It simply happened, and she was still there, and she raised one hand in a small wave, and he raised his. And something in the air between them was different, not dramatic, not miraculous in the conventional sense, but clean in a way it had not been for 22 years. He brought Enzo to Donna Elvira's house 5 days later. He told the boy simply, "I want you to spend the morning with your grandmother. She wants to show you how to make the pasta she makes at Christmas. I have some work to do nearby." He dropped Enzo at the door, greeted his mother briefly, and walked to a bar around the corner where he ordered a coffee and sat and read the newspaper for 2 hours. When he came back, he found Enzo and Donna Elvira in the kitchen. Flour on both of them, a length of pasta drying on a cloth stretched between 2 chairs. Enzo was talking, really talking, the way children talk when they are with someone whose attention is completely on them, about something at school, a friend, a teacher he did not like. And Donna Elvira was listening with her full, careful attention, asking questions that showed she had heard every word. Lorenzo stood in the doorway for a moment without being noticed. He watched his son's face. It was open in a way he did not often see it. Relaxed, present. Something in the boy that had been contracted was simply, quietly, not contracted. He knocked on the doorframe to announce himself. Enzo looked up and said, "Papa, did you know Nonna once walked 12 kilometers to Mass in the snow because the roads were blocked?" He said it with pride, not the thin pride children sometimes perform for adults, but genuine pride. The pride of a child who has just discovered that one of the people in his life is remarkable. Donna Elvira looked at Lorenzo over Enzo's head, and she smiled. In the years that followed, something shifted in the Benedetti household in ways that were gradual and unmistakable. Lorenzo's prayers changed, not in their form or their frequency, but in their quality. The ceiling he had always encountered lifted. He described it later to a friend, a cabinet maker named Beppe, as the difference between praying from inside a room with the windows closed and praying with the windows open. The room is the same room, but the air is different, and you do not realize how stale it was until you feel the fresh air. His relationship with Carmela deepened in ways neither of them fully articulated, but both of them noticed. She told her sister Rosa some years later that there had been a change in Lorenzo around 1957, that something in him had softened without becoming less. "He is the same man," she said, "but he is more of himself." And Enzo, when Enzo was 16, 5 years after his morning in the kitchen, making Christmas pasta with Donna Elvira, he had his version of the moment, not in his parents' kitchen. At school, with a younger boy he had bullied briefly and thoughtlessly, in the way of 16-year-olds who do not yet fully understand that words have mass. The moment of cruelty was small, but within 2 days, Enzo went back to that boy and said something specific about what he had said and why it was wrong. Not because Lorenzo had instructed him to, not because a priest had told him to, but because something in him recognized the pattern, recognized it the way you recognize a recurring melody, and chose differently. Lorenzo told this story to his own confessor many years later, an older priest in Lecce who had known him for decades, and the priest wrote it down in a private notebook, along with a note that read, "This is what Padre Pio said that grace does when the channel is open. It moves not just upward toward God, and not just inward to the soul, but forward to the next person, and the next, and the next. The current of honor, once restored, does not stop at the one who restored it." Lorenzo Benedetti died in 1989 at the age of 70. His children and grandchildren gathered at his bedside. One of his grandchildren, Enzo's eldest son, who had grown up with the stories and carried them forward, said afterward that when he thought of his grandfather, the word that came to him first was not hard-working, though he had been, or faithful, though he had been that too. The word was simply generous, not in the financial sense. in the specific sense of a man who gave his presence fully to the people around him, who did not keep something back. Donna Elvira lived until she was 87. She died with her son at her bedside, holding his hand. In the weeks before her death, when she was very weak and spoke in short sentences, she said to Lorenzo on one of his visits, "That Tuesday morning when you came to the house, that was one of the best mornings of my life." He had brought her coffee from the bar down the street because she was too weak by then to make it herself. They sat at the same kitchen table, and nothing was left unsaid between them. What moves me most about Lorenzo's story, and what I want to say to you directly before we close, is this. Lorenzo did not understand the full spiritual mechanics of what Padre Pio told him. He was a carpenter. He understood wood and tools and the satisfaction of a joint that fits. He understood the image Padre Pio gave him, and he went home and he did the specific thing he was told to do with his physical voice at the physical kitchen table to his physical mother. He did not wait until he felt ready. He did not wait until he fully understood it. He simply went. Because Padre Pio had told him that the mouth that cursed must be the mouth that blesses, and that the blessing must be as specific as the curse. And his mother had been waiting 22 years for that specific thing. Many of you watching this today have someone who is waiting. I'm asking you gently, as one person who knows what it is to have waited too long, please do not let them wait any longer. Now, I want to invite you to do something specific, not a general examination of conscience, something more targeted. Think of one moment, one specific moment in the past. It could be a year ago, it could be 22 years ago, it could be last week, in which you said something to someone you love that you have not specifically named and addressed, not apologized for in general terms, not included in a vague, "Forgive me for everything I have done," but specifically named. "On this occasion I said this thing and it was wrong." The person may be your mother, your father, your husband or wife, a child, a sibling. They may be alive and reachable, or they may already be gone. And if they are gone, there is still something that can be done. And I will come back to that in a future video, because Padre Pio had specific teachings on healing in relationships with those who have passed, and they are remarkable. But if the person is alive, if you could pick up a phone today, or get in a car this week, or write a letter and seal it and put it in the post, I am asking you to do what Lorenzo did. Go to them in a quiet moment, sit with them, and say the specific thing, not "I'm sorry if I hurt you." The specific thing, what you said when you said it, that it was wrong. And then, if you can, say the second thing, that you honor them, that you are grateful for them, not in general, in the specific language that reverses the specific wound. This is what Padre Pio taught. This is what changed the Benedetti family across 3 generations. And this is what I believe from everything I have studied, and from everything I have seen in the families I have worked alongside, and from my own imperfect experience of trying to do this with people I could still reach, and grieving that I could not do it with the one I could not. This is what heals. The mouth that cursed can bless, but it must choose to do so, specifically, out loud, to the face of the person who heard the curse. Today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today, make that choice. Write the name of that person in your mind, right now, and commit to reaching them before this week is out. Padre Pio said, pray, hope, and don't worry. I would add, from everything I have learned through his life, then go and say the specific thing. Because some doors can only be opened from the inside, and you are the only one who can open yours. God bless you, and thank you for being here today. Has there ever been a specific moment, one sentence you said to someone you love that you have never directly addressed? You do not have to share the words. Just tell me in the comments, this is Lorenzo's story too. Or if something in this video has already moved you to act, write, I'm going. Because sometimes all we need is to say it out loud to someone, even a stranger, to make it real.